Hey, welcome to Bible Break down in my basement, the BBB. So glad you could be with me here. For some of you who know that maybe about 15 or 18 people last night saw John Watson's video, his live presentation that he does on the second coming and different things. And he was gracious enough to allow me to be on a phone call and to call and talk to him. Now, due to the audio, even on the what we came back afterwards and what was saved is a little bit mushy, and so I wanted to take this time to clarify some points and talk about the second coming and the parousia. And it was a natural video that I was going to be presenting anyway in the series that I've been starting to go through on my YouTube channel. So with that, let me start with something here. When Jesus was talking about the Son of Man coming on clouds in Matthew 24:30, what he was doing there was quoting from Daniel 7:13 and 14. And it says in that passage is that it was the Son of Man who is coming on clouds and being presented to the Father. He is being presented to the Father, and he is sitting on his throne. Somebody posted in the list there in those scriptures about them seeing the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Well, this coming in his kingdom, based on that passage of Daniel 7 and 13 and 14, his coming is into the presence of heaven. He's being presented before the Ancient of Days, who sits on his throne in heaven. So this is a picture of the ascension and him coming into heaven and receiving that and sitting down at the right hand of the Father. So when Jesus is quoting this, what he is installing by his inference of this is that it's the Son of Man coming in clouds is judgment language. That whole chapter there is about judgment. And previous, and then verses 9 and 10, he's talking about the judgment, the thrones being set, and the Ancient Days sitting there, and thousands before him, and the books are open, which is the picture of Revelations 20 and the judgment, the great white throne judgment. So this is the theme of talking about the judgment of the beast and everything else. So this is the theme of that Daniel 7. It is not a second coming passage. So when it's used in other places, like with Caiaphas, when Caiaphas asked him, are you the Christ? Are you the king? And Jesus' response back was, from this point forward, you will see me sitting at the right hand of the Father, coming on clouds. And what he was saying is, you will see me sitting at the right hand of the Father. You're going to see me, because that was a messianic prophecy. I'm the Messiah. I'm the one who's going to be sitting at the right hand of the Father that is now going to send judgment on you. Because they understood that coming on clouds is Old Testament language for coming on clouds, coming in judgment. In the Old Testament, it was God who always sent another army to do the destruction. What happened in Jerusalem in 70 AD? It was another army that came to destroy Jerusalem. That is the same thing. We're talking about Old Covenant, Old Testament coming of the Lord. Now, when Josephus recorded the works and the history of the Maccabees in that time period, he used that word parousia. It was the parousia of an army that came on God's behalf. It was Israel that came back and liberated Israel from the Ptolemies and the Greeks, and recaptured Israel. And when we go back even to Josephus in the book of Maccabees, it's the same thing. He uses that word twice in there, and talking about armies that come on the behest of God to carry out his work and to do. In other words, the Israelites' armies that he raised up was there performing God's work as a judgment against the Greeks that had captured Jerusalem and destroyed it. So now here, Matthew, an Old Testament writing book, gospel, where Jesus is under that whole time frame is still under the Old Testament. He is using that in the same sense as that from Josephus or Maccabees. From the Greek Septuagint, it was used in that way, that it is a coming of the Lord in judgment. It was never about a personal coming of Christ. Now, in the video, in last night's discussion, Mr. Watts wanted to talk about James and saying, well, hey, this was a coming, just like in Acts 1, there was a coming in clouds and all of that and everything else. So it's the same parousia. No. Paul completely creates a different scenario of understanding of what the parousia is. And as he brought up last night, and I want to make sure it's very, very clear, it was used in the Roman world to talk about a king who comes to a city to deal with a situation that he alone can deal with. It's his personal presence of coming and dealing with this. And it's where Caesar is being declared, I'm the Lord, I'm God, and it's God who's coming to the city to deal with it. There's those nuances. And Paul in his theology is what he turned those tables back on and said, no, it's Christ, it's Jesus who is Lord, and it is his parousia. He is the one who is coming to deal with the situation and do things that nobody else can. So that word, and you can look it up in Strong's, you can look it up in Thayer's, and it says the same thing. There are two usages. And this is what I also argued last night, is that Don Preston argues extensively that the parousia used in Matthew is the same as that as the Old Testament in the way it was used in Maccabees and by Josephus. The meaning of it never required the personal presence or a coming of Jesus himself. Now, when we go into Acts, James, and all the other passages where it used the word parousia, and it's used 16 times concerning Jesus, 24 altogether only in the New Testament. Of those times in the New Testament, like I said, it's 16 times of Jesus himself, but it is used and translated once as Paul's bodily presence coming. Your bodily presence is weak. And that word there for bodily presence is parousia. It is also used for the lawless one who comes, we talked about in 2:9, the parousia of the lawless one, his personal presence and coming. Everybody will sit there and tell you, well, quote unquote, Nero was the beast, and his coming, okay, are you going to sit there and tell me it wasn't a real, visible, literal coming of the beast? That's impossible, because I got people even telling me it was the army that was the beast. Well, that's very real and physical and being seen. So the coming of something very physical is being presented in that idea. So this is what we're seeing in Acts 1. When Jesus was standing there and with his disciples, it says very, very specifically, and you do the exegesis on there, that he was lifted up and the cloud received them and took them out of sight. This is not where the cloud comes down, covers him up in darkness, or, and it's mist and everything, and then he floats away and he's gone, he never is seen. It doesn't work that way. He was taken up into the clouds, not taken up by or on or with the clouds. He was taken into the clouds. So now if he's being taken into the clouds, his coming then will be in the like manner. From out of the clouds he will come, and his feet will stand in the Mount of Olives. He will come and return to Jerusalem when he comes back. That's what the angel was saying. His return is to Jerusalem. That is the parousia. That is what we're talking about. And that's different than the parousia of God who comes in the Old Testament riding on a swift cloud. Two different things. That is Scripture. That is the meaning of the word. That is the two parallels that we got. So when here's the interesting part, is Matthew is the only one who used that word. Luke, John didn't even talk about the Olivet, but Luke and Mark both also talked about the Olivet and used it, but never used the word parousia. Only Matthew did. And the only time you find that word used, of course, in all the Gospels is just in that Matthew 24. Now, Matthew was a companion of Paul for a lot of times. That verbal tradition, gospel that was passed on through until it was written down, came from Matthew. That's how Paul knew some of the things that he did. Like, for instance, when Paul said in Corinthians, on the night that he was betrayed, he took the bread, the cup. Well, how did he know that specifically? He learned that from Matthew. Matthew was there. Who else was his companions? Timothy and Luke. Neither one of them were there. It was only Matthew. So that traditional verbal message was passed on, and Paul heard it and received it. Now, so when we're talking about the difference between his comings, we're talking about, parousia is also used about his first coming. It's used one time for that, and the other times it's used about people coming, their parousia, they're coming and arriving on in a situation. But Christ himself, his parousia is an event. That word is used as a noun, not as the verb as him coming or his presence being there, but it is presence after being absence that is being used there. And that word appearing, that idea is used consistently with Paul in his gospel. For instance, the word epiphania, which is translated appearing, it's translated as appearing, is used 6 times, and the word literally means to be made visible, to manifest. So in 1 Thessalonians 4, it says, Jesus himself descends. It is Jesus himself who comes. The angel in Acts 1, it will be this Jesus who comes. It's not a cloud of glory or anything else. He doesn't come in the glory. He comes in the glory of his Father. But glory is not necessarily just a cloud or anything else. The glory is what's good and awesome about something. If you look the word up in the Strongs, it doesn't have anything to do with some physical or anything else. It simply means that you come in the good reputation of, with all kinds of good things is what you're thinking about and saying. So when somebody comes in his glory, that means he's coming in his best manner. He's awesome and that. So when Jesus Christ comes in his glory, it doesn't mean he comes in a cloud and is not seen. Because remember, the first time he became flesh and dwelt among men and appeared the first time to deal with sin. He will appear a second time for the salvation, the consummation of that, which would be the redemption of the bodies, which is a different discussion that we'll get into later. But the idea here is still 2 different types of appearing. The appearing of Christ is not the appearing of God of clouds and imagery that's created in the Old Testament. This is literal on Acts 1. He will literally come through the clouds. And then when we go to Revelations 19, he comes through the clouds riding on a white horse. Yes, the white horse represents he comes to war. And he comes and he kills the beast and makes war on the beast. There's some similar parallels between the Olivet and Revelation. But here, it is always the distinction is that it's Jesus himself appears, and he appears bodily. That is what the church has been teaching and is what is taught for 2,000 years. Based on the word epiphany, he appears. He is made visible. He manifests. Clouds, chariots, that's not Christ himself. That is not Jesus himself. Look up the word all the way through the New Testament where it says Jesus himself or Timothy himself or whatever it might be himself. It doesn't mean somebody else or something else came in his way. It means he, the person himself, came. And that's what we've understood about scriptures and his parousia, that it is Jesus Christ himself who comes and appears at the second coming. That is the distinction. Okay, and video, second part of the next video, we'll get back to you later. We'll continue this discussion and we'll continue it with a different frame of reference. Thank you for watching. I've got my new website up. It's middleton.org. And the reason for this is just a quick introduction to get people towards my blog and towards my videos to be able to look at them and understand and see. So thank you for watching and have a blessed night.